When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers.
Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figure it out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Offers require port and of number not currently active on T-Mobile network. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 40p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the RaceHaven radio show and podcast. This is solutions-focused dialogue about race in America. My name is Scott Speed, and I am the facilitator of the dialogue. This is episode 8 of RaceHaven, and the title of today's show is Love Transcends Misunderstandings. On today's show, I will dialogue with my special guest, Molly Roman, about an article that she wrote for her blog titled, Love is Not Irritable. When I read the article, I felt like it was the perfect explanation for why I felt moved to start RaceHaven. Molly is a writer, author, life coach, and the founder of Verge of Greatness. Next, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Miss Molly Roman. Good morning, Molly. How are you?
Morning. I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing great. So what I'd like to do is let our listeners know how we met. So first, I want to say thanks for joining me here this morning on the podcast. And I want to share with our listeners that Molly and I actually met in 2000, probably around 2010, 2011, through my nonprofit organization called the Neighborhood Enrichment Project. And Molly was introduced to me through a friend who was a key volunteer and co-founder of the Neighborhood Enrichment Project, Michelle Hessian. And Molly was one of our first donors and just supporters and volunteers, and someone who I told her the other day that it just meant so much to have someone very early in the process support what we were trying to do, like herself. And, she was very selfless, and I just appreciate her so much. So, Molly, again, as I said to you on the phone, I want to say to all of our listeners, thank you. And I'm really excited that we've had an opportunity to reconnect today on the podcast because of this amazing article that you wrote. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and Verge of Greatness? Sure.
Well, first of all, thanks for that really nice intro. That was very nice of you. Sometimes I think that God places people together for a reason, and at that time in my life, I was really trying to tithe, and your organization came up, and I believed in what you're doing, and I think He just put us together so that I could fulfill the need for you and do what I felt I was called to do. So it was really just kind of a nice meeting of the minds. But what I do, I'm kind of like a jack of all trades when it comes to life stuff. So I'm a certified coach, but I'm also a writer. With Verge of Greatness, we have a couple different projects going on. So I have what I just call the Verge of Greatness Project. I'm following 5 women for 5 years. I do an interview with them, and then I write an article as if I am them. So it's like a first-person interpretation of our interview. And then it follows up with a how-to article. So if somebody tells me a story about how they overcame a broken relationship within their family, then I will come up with a follow-up article to teach others how to do that as well. And then the second part, which is where Love is Not Irritable comes from, is the Love series. And this is a focus on a passage actually out of the New Testament, and it's 1 Corinthians 4 through 8. You'll hear it at weddings a lot. It's love is patient, love is kind, it is not boastful or envious. I won't go through the whole passage, but eventually it gets to love is not irritable. So that's just a current project that actually we have 3 weeks left, and then we'll probably just go back to interviewing women and continuing with those articles.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. So before we get into our dialogue, I want to first share with our listeners what is dialogue. We really focus heavily on that term. And what I've learned as an adult and through my doctoral studies is that there's actually a science to dialogue. It's not just dialogue in the sense that we use it in our day-to-day lives as I have gone through life, we kind of use it in a certain way, but I've learned that there's actually more to it. And during each show, I'm going to share a different definition or example of dialogue as defined in the book Dialogue and the Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs. So for today, I want to share that dialogue creates an open-minded attitude to being wrong and an openness to change. Now, to contrast that, debate creates a closed-minded attitude, a determination to be right. And a lot of times people confuse dialogue with debate. And in the media, social, as well as news media, we see a lot of debate going on, and it's disguised as dialogue. So one of the things that we try to do through this podcast and through our website and our Facebook platform is to be a champion for true, authentic dialogue. So with that being said, Race Haven is a safe place for people from diverse ethnic, religious, cultural, and political backgrounds to bring their race-based perspectives, questions, assumptions, frustrations, and experiences to engage in thoughtful, honest dialogue in an effort to transcend race in America. Here is our framework for authentic dialogue on this podcast. Number one, participants listen with a sense of curiosity and ask questions to uncover the underlying assumptions and beliefs behind someone's statements. Number two, participants are willing to communicate their thoughts openly and honestly while putting aside emotions, defensiveness, and a desire to be right. And number three, participants approach someone who sees a problem differently, not as an adversary, but as a colleague in pursuit of better solutions. So, welcome to the dialogue. Molly, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right. So, to start out, Molly, I want to first ask you the question, what is your ethnicity?
Sure. So, I believe you call it European American. If we really want to go into that, it's a mix of Romanian, English, French, and German.
Awesome. Okay. And the reason why I ask about your ethnicity is because, through my research and trying to understand race on a deeper level, I've come to learn that the concepts of what is called white is a social construct that was created. And I'll just say for our listeners to, do some research on what white means. But one of the reasons why I ask for your ethnicity is because when someone says they're white, that doesn't really tell me anything. But when someone says that they're, like you said, Romanian, English, and what was the other European ethnicity that you said?
French and German.
Okay, so you said Romanian, English, French, and German. Okay, so then, so that tells me so much more about you. When you say you name those countries, I'm able to, get a little sense of your heritage and where your roots are. And I believe that tells a better story than just white. I also, one of the reasons why I personally use the term European American when describing quote unquote white people is because I find it interesting that we in America, when we mention ethnicities or race, we speak about Mexican Americans, we speak about Native Americans, we speak about, Chinese Americans or Korean or Japanese Americans or even, African Americans. And then we say white people. So, and then to flip that, I also don't say black anymore either, just because of this higher awareness and consciousness that I now have. I only say African American. Now, in my titles and things like that for the show, you'll see me write white just because I know that's what speaks to the masses. But in general, when people listen to this podcast, I just want to challenge people to really think deeply about that. Why is it that the quote unquote race of white and black people are colors, but every other race we refer to them based on their ethnicity? So I think in order to create, a more rich understanding of who we are as people and a level playing field in terms of equality, I think that it's better to just refer to people, by their ethnicity. So that's why I like to start out by asking you what your ethnicity is. And because this is a show about race, I think it adds context for our listeners as well. So thank you for sharing that. The next thing I'd like you to share is, where are you from? Tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and if you're not familiar with the Midwest, that is basically Northeast Indiana. I was there till I was about 19 until I went to school at Indiana University, and wasn't back for more than 3 months until I was about 30 or 31, we moved back to Fort Wayne. And in that meantime, I lived in Indianapolis for 2 years, and then moved to Atlanta for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. I can't keep track. Time flies when you're there.
Yes, and that's where we met in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So tell me about your upbringing in the community that you grew up in and how that impacted your views on race in America. I know that when we spoke briefly the other day, you mentioned that you grew up in a predominantly European-American community and went to predominantly European-American schools. So how did that, if you could share a little bit about that and how that impacted your views on race in America, if it did in any way.
Sure. So I went to private Catholic schools, grade school and high school. So Catholicism, comes, or it's, most predominant in Europe, right? So it makes sense that we have a lot of European Americans at our school. We had, I believe when I was there, we had 3 African Americans and 2 were exchange students. So that was really, think about growing up. Who do you hang out with? You hang out with your classmates. Those are the people you tend to be friends with, unless you do extracurricular activities outside of school. But most people don't. So that was really my upbringing in terms of Fort Wayne. Now, when I went to IU, things were a little bit different, right? You have a more diverse culture. It's not a Catholic school. So obviously you're going to have people of all different ethnicities and different economic backgrounds. And, I remember I came home from school for the first time, and I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, is there a synagogue in Fort Wayne? I realized I had never even met a Jewish person.
Wow.
So it was really, it's pretty crazy, thinking about that now. But, so I'd say I lived a pretty sheltered life growing up in terms of my exposure to different types of people. I'm thankful that my dad was first-generation American, because we did get to see some of that Romanian culture as I grew up, so at least I was aware that there was more out there than just, like, straight American, there was, different cultures. But, that was, upbringing, that was pretty much... going to college was really eye-opening.
Cool. Okay, so let me ask you this. And in those experiences, did you ever experience any racism or anything towards African Americans? Because, in our country, and what we address on this show is the gap and misunderstanding specifically between European Americans and African Americans because of, our history in America and all that has come from that. So I'm just curious to know, did you notice that in your upbringing that there was this sort of tension, this racial tension between Americans of European descent and Americans of African descent?
No, I don't think I ever witnessed that. I'm just trying to think. So it was actually the most eye-opening experience for me was when I moved to Atlanta, and I remember being at a pool party, and I just met some guy, and he was trying to impress me with a racist joke. I was thinking, really? You don't even know me. Like, you don't know if I'd be cool with that. And that was, in Indiana, my experience, which doesn't mean truth, but the experiences I had were that if somebody was racist, they were only racist around other racist people. It was not out in the open. But when I moved to the South, people were more open about it, and that was really a strange experience to have. Now, that's my experience. It doesn't mean it's true. Those are just the experiences that I had.
No, and actually, it's true for you. And what's interesting is I'm glad you say that, because we make a lot of assumptions as people and in general, and I think that a lot of in my conversation. For a lot of African American people that I've spoken with, there's kind of like an assumption that a lot of Americans of European descent grow up around racist views, and I've learned through my experience that that's not always the case. And like you said, you grew up around a majority European American environment, and I grew up around a majority African American environment until I got to high school. And a lot of my friends and family only socialize with and work with, et cetera, with African Americans for a long period of time. So that's the perspective I got. So there's just a lot of, when you don't have a chance to really interact with people different than you, then you're able, you kind of, you form these assumptions based on the things you hear and learn. And it's not until you have different experiences that you learn different. So your truth is legitimate, and everyone's truth is legitimate. So with that being said, I appreciate you sharing those insights, and I find that interesting, and I love getting those different insights from different backgrounds. So let's jump into your article. You wrote an article on your Verge of Greatness blog called "Love is Not Irritable," and as I said before, after reading it, I felt like it was the perfect companion article for why I felt moved to start Race Haven. So I want to ask, what motivated you to write this article?
Sure. So last fall, I had dinner with one of my girlfriends, and she asked me, what do you want? Like, what is your overall goal for your life? And she's a life coach as well, so we always have these, deep questions for each other. And I looked at her and I go, I just want to be love. Like, just be love. Like, could you imagine if that was your life? I mean, just think about the impact you would have for other people and how that would be for you too. And so about a week later, I thought, why am I waiting to figure out what that is? Like, do I think like in 30 or 40 years, all of a sudden I'm just going to be love and, it just happens? So I decided before I could be love, why don't I try to figure out what love is? So at that point, I decided, you know what? Why don't I make this into articles? I have this blog, and if other people benefit from it, great. If they don't, that's okay too. This is, started off as a spiritual exercise for myself, but if it can help other people, why not put it out there?
Okay. And I want to share with our listeners some key quotes from the article, and I want, to get your feedback and kind of dig a little bit deeper. And I also want to share some thoughts that I have so that I can help our listeners understand more why I feel like this is the perfect companion piece in terms of explaining why, I felt motivated to start Race Haven. So the first key quote that I like to highlight is where you wrote, misunderstanding may be one of the biggest causes of divisiveness within our society. When we don't understand something or we may not prefer one's opinion, we judge it as wrong and at times take personal offense to it. We most commonly see this in the political arena, race issues, religious beliefs, our legal system, and laws coming to pass, as well as in simple differences in our mannerisms or cultures. It's where we have a clash of beliefs, perceptions, or values. So, as you noted, most people want to judge or condemn during disagreements. How are you able to arrive at these insights versus just going along with most people and judging others?
That's a good question. It's easy when something hits one of our values and goes against it to automatically become defensive. In thinking about love as irritable, I feel like, this is what kind of came up for me. Sorry, I'm just trying to think about how to answer this question. But it's not easy, to not be judgmental sometimes. We're all human, and it's easy when something hits a nerve to automatically look at it as, well, that person's wrong, or how dare they say this, or and to become defensive. And it's really a mental exercise to, when you have those thoughts, to say, okay, what is it that I might not know about this? And if I can't figure that out right now, how can I figure out the other person's perception?
And what struck me about that is your ability to even do that, because I have these, race conversations all the time on our Facebook page, Race Haven, and also off of that page, just all across social media. Whenever there's an article that's race-related or an issue in the media that's a hotbed issue, you get a lot of comments and long threads, and you get to see what people think. And more often than not, you see defensiveness, you see judgment, you see people, kind of picking sides, and you don't see many people, that have the ability to do what you did just in that statement right there, which is, reflecting and being able to realize that just because someone's, different or have different views, to not necessarily judge it as wrong or take personal offense to it. So I was really struck by that because, again, that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to start Race Haven initially as a Facebook group, because I wanted a place to have a constructive forum for dialogue around these issues where we weren't being judgmental. We weren't assuming that everything that we felt was right, but a place where we could listen to one another and listen to diverse, opinions and perceptions, because as I stated earlier, everyone's truth is their truth and they arrived at that truth for a reason, be it their background, the way they were raised, their experiences. And I feel like when you, just automatically tell someone they're wrong, you're not valuing, that person and how they arrived at, where they are in life. And with that, we don't make progress. And that's why we see all this tension and this divisiveness. And, when you said love is not irritable, which is the title of the article, what stands out to me is on the flip side is where people say love is unconditional. And I feel like that's what you were trying to convey, in that statement. So I thought that was awesome, right from the beginning. You stated that misunderstanding may be one of the biggest causes of divisiveness within our society. So my next question to you is, again, I'm fascinated with how you pulled out misunderstanding. You didn't say, the fact that these people don't get what I'm saying or, kind of getting defensive, or I don't know why people feel this way. You immediately called it misunderstanding. So what is it in your experience or your understanding of how you labeled them? You said in the political arena, race issues, religious beliefs, et cetera. And obviously we focus on race issues here. But when you see these race-based issues that are being debated, why did you say misunderstandings versus saying, pointing the finger like, I don't know what's wrong with those people?
That's a good question. I don't know if you're going to like my answer or not, but, in my writing, I definitely believe that, you can believe in the Holy Spirit or God. I definitely believe my pen is guided. And, I can tell you from my experience, when I sit down and really try to think about a topic and write it myself, and then I sit down and I shut my eyes and just let whatever come, the articles are vastly different in quality and content. And, with this love series, I've been really trying to be open with just receiving what comes in and then just doing small edits around it. So why I chose the word misunderstanding, I don't know if I chose that. I think that was something that came in. So, it's probably, I don't think it's the answer you're probably looking for, but, that's the answer I got.
Well, no, and let me say this, I appreciate your answer, and I'm not looking for anything. I want you to just be your most authentic, truest self without apology. So if God gave it to you, God gave it to you. If you felt moved by, a higher power, then that is great as well. So by all means, definitely share that. And, I appreciate that. And I'm sure our listeners do as well. And one of the things that I like to point out is that word stands out to me a lot because that's kind of what I perceive. I perceived a big misunderstanding because in my experience and with my Facebook, friends and where I experienced most of these things, I have my family and friends who I grew up with in Philadelphia who are predominantly African-American. And then I went to a college that was predominantly European-American, and I have all of my friends and colleagues from there and associates from there, acquaintances. And then I have my professional associates and acquaintances, that with that range in ethnicity. And because I have this vast range of friends on Facebook, I'm able to see not only my friends of European-American descent feel and think about these various race issues, but also their friends and family. And so when I'm reading their threads, I see certain statements and certain things that they say, and I immediately say, man, it's just a misunderstanding. And then on the flip side, when I read things that my African-American, peers say, and I listen and I read, and I'm like, man, there's just such a big gap in misunderstanding. And that's why I chose to bring this platform of Race Haven together, is because, and also have diverse guests. If you listen to some of the shows previous to this one, it's because I feel like it'll be better if everyone got a chance to hear and learn from each other and each other's true perspectives, because I think there's just so much that's assumed. And at the core of it, we all want the same things in life, but there's just so many misunderstandings that get in the way of that. So that's why that quote stood out to me. So let me move to the next key quote from the article. It says, becoming irritated and offended not only takes the stage from love, but it creates a gap between us and other people. How can we be loving when we are busy being irritated with someone for having different beliefs and experiences? How can we create a relationship with someone we judge as wrong? How can we see the value in others that are different than us if we don't value those differences? This lack of understanding truly keeps us small, and it keeps us from extending love to others. So I want to give you the opportunity to elaborate on that before I share why that quote just really, how it just resonates with me on the highest level. So do you have anything you'd like to share in terms of elaborating on that, and also any insights on how you think that statement can help us transcend and move past race-based tensions in America?
Sure. So the lack of understanding of each other, the reason I think this keeps us small is because we can't gain knowledge from each other if we're being defensive, right? So I'm going to go back to what is it that I don't know about this. So if we took on that approach rather than being defensive, we might learn something different. So in terms of race issues, everyone has experiences that creates their reality. But what if their reality is not totally true? Maybe even just one experience can change our perception on something. So what if instead we chose to ask each other, what makes you think this way? Tell me about your experiences. Help me understand why you have your perceptions. And then maybe we'll learn and grow something different out of that. So that's really, I think, the point of that quote. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because, again, when I read the article, I literally just felt all the warm fuzzies and goosebumps because as I think about my work with Race Haven, I drive around and I'm always thinking about why. When I think about why do I feel called to create this platform or do this podcast? And it all goes back to love. It goes back to relationships. And also when I think about solutions and how I can help people understand what I'm trying to convey, it always goes back to love and relationships. And the way I think about it, and it's funny because I'm thinking about like writing a book and, to kind of illustrate this and give the perfect analogy. And the book that I was going to write, it's not formulated in any way yet, but I had this concept of America, will you marry me? Okay? America, will you marry me? And the reason why is because I see such strong correlations to what marriage is and love to the problems that we see in our society. And what I mean by that is when you're in a relationship with someone, when you're, especially in marriage, one of the core tenets of marriage is in sickness and health, and also to love someone unconditionally, and you have to compromise in marriage. And what I mean by that is when you value a relationship with someone, even in your differences, you're going to sit down at the table and you're going to talk it out and you're going to try to find a mid-ground, okay? And not even as going as deep as marriage, but with people you care about, family and brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, and uncles, people who you truly value relationships with. When you have differences with someone that you truly value relationships with, you're going to be more open to listening to them and really trying to understand the reason why they feel the way they feel, just like you just said. Asking questions as to why do you feel that way? And what I see happening in society too much is, again, people holding on to their own reasons and beliefs and truths as the only beliefs and truths, instead of asking why and more or less trying to compromise and come to a mid ground so that everyone can be happy. Because when you're in a marriage, it's all about how can we be happy together, right? And with that, you have to give up some of yourself. There's a level of humility that's required to have a successful marriage. And for me, I always think to myself when I'm thinking about these race-based issues, I think to myself that if everyone would just think about the value of being in relationship with each other and what we could do with each other and for each other as a society, if we treated everyone as someone that we were trying to nurture and maintain a relationship with, we would get past all this divisiveness and tension so much quicker. So that's really like the message that I ultimately want to convey in the best way I felt like I could convey it. And it's something I've been formulating in my mind, and you totally hit it, with that particular quote. And I just thought that was amazing because I really believe that when you put yourself in the mindset of, even with people you don't know, and this is what's hard for some people, but I think, again, love transcends everything, right? And even when we talk about spirituality, God is love. Like, God is love is so powerful to me because that just says, he's everything. He or she or the being, whatever your belief is, God is everything. And love transcends everything, right? So if I can meet a stranger, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their upbringing or background, and my immediate thing is, how can I strengthen my relationship with this person? That means if that person brings a different viewpoint on certain issues, that I'm willing to listen and get a better understanding as to the reasons why they feel the way they feel. Because, again, my primary aim is building relationships. Does that make sense, Molly?
Definitely. What I was going to go back to, first of all, when you're ready to write the book, let me know, and I will tell you everything I learned about that process, and, I'll help you formulate your outline if you want.
Thank you.
Two, talking about love is not irritable, the reason I believe that people hold on to their beliefs and values and, they can be unkind towards each other, it falls back into love is not arrogant or rude. We don't value each other as equals. And so we think it's okay to push our beliefs on somebody else or to be rude in comments on Facebook because we're not valuing that person as a person. And one thing I do, similar to how you look at people as how can I strengthen this relationship, one thing I am trying to do myself is look at people and say, how would I treat you if you were your childlike form right now? So if you were that innocent little 5-year-old, how would I treat you? Even though you might be rude to me right now, or you might be, just trying to push your beliefs on me and, antagonize me, how can I treat you like you're your 5-year-old child? And that kind of goes into love is kind, right? It's easy to be kind to those who are kind to us. It's easy to be in dialogue with those who will be in dialogue with us. So the really hard part is how can I be kind to those people that are putting these harsh comments on Facebook, or how can I be kind to somebody who's being antagonistic right now? I'm excited for your book, and I think as you dive into it, you're really going to get into this stuff and see how it's so intertwined with each other, and I'm really excited for your book. So whenever it's ready, I'm going to buy a copy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm really, it's something I think about often. And, I think about the last part of that segment where you write, this lack of understanding truly keeps us small, and it keeps us from extending love to others. And, without being judgmental, I just want to, one of the things I want to do is just challenge everyone to expand their hearts. It's something that I say a lot on this podcast is that, it's about expanding minds and hearts. That's the reason why I do this. Not change minds and hearts, but to expand minds and expand hearts so that you're willing to include other people's thoughts and feelings. And it goes back to some other things that we're about to get into. But, I just think at the core of it all, it's about love. And I think as a society, if we can all learn to love better, it will improve everything. It will improve relationships among family members. It will improve marriages and partnerships and just friendships as our capacity to love. So I'm with you. And I, in terms of, sending that message to the world. And I just so appreciate you writing, this article and doing this series on love. So the next element I want to get into, or key quote, is you wrote that in our world, we are always going to come across people that are different from us. Rather than misunderstanding or taking offense, what if we celebrate their uniqueness? God created those that are our opposites. He gave us a world of billions of people with differing experiences and beliefs. We can learn from each other. We can cherish each other. We can love each other. So would you like to elaborate on that a little?
Sure. Yeah, so actually I take about a week to write each article, and when I was focusing on this, I had a conversation with a girlfriend of mine who was at work, and, I was like, how's your new job? How's it going? And she's like, oh, there's people here that bugging me. She goes, but there's always going to be people at work that bug you, it's just going to happen. And I was like, oh my gosh, light bulb, you're so right. There, no matter what we do, people are going to hit a nerve with us. And so with that, are we always going to react and create feelings within us that are stressful or anger or anxiety? I'm very, my methodology is what feelings am I creating in my life that do not serve me? And so by reacting, creates feelings that do not serve me, and it does not serve creating relationships with other people. So with this section of the article, it's really, what would it look like if we didn't have those feelings and instead we created feelings of love?
That's excellent. That's excellent. And what really stood out to me, I want to just quote Dr. King, really quick. And this may be a quote that you've heard before, where he says, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I wanted to bring that quote to the forefront because we're in a time right now in our country where there's a presidential race, and there's a lot of fear, that I feel like politics a lot of times is based on fear, as well as the news media and a lot of things. It's based on fear. And these, when I hear people saying that they're like literally scared of certain people get into office, I just really feel like we have a deficiency in our country of love. I really feel like this stance of fearing or I guess even inciting fear, for power or for gain or even for money, we use fear. I'm sorry, not we, but a lot of people in our country choose to use fear to get support for their movements and whatever they're trying to do. And I just want to speak out against that. And I want to challenge us as Americans to really do what you just said in this piece. You said that, I love when you said that, God created a world of billions of people, and he gave us so many differences and uniqueness, and it should be celebrated. One of the things that is said in these racial discussions, you'll hear people in America say, I don't see race or I don't see color. And one of my friends and colleagues in this mission, a gentleman by the name of Montoya Smith, I love what he says. He said, we shouldn't aim to have color-blind society. We should aim to have a color-rich society. And what I'll say to, expand on that is we should aim to have ethnicity or ethnic-rich society, meaning not trying to be blind towards other people's backgrounds, cultures, and ethnicities, but rather to celebrate them, and not to be afraid of differences, but to celebrate them. And I think a lot of the tension, the divisiveness, and even a lot of the crime and that we face in this country is based on fear and anger. And I feel like if we had a society that embraced one another, as you say here, and celebrated each other's uniqueness and celebrated the richness of our different experiences and our different beliefs. Again, God put us in all different places and different parts of the world and gave us different languages and different, belief systems and cultures and all these just things that are so unique and rich. But for some reason, we've been raised to fear those things. And there's so much, again, tension and divisiveness that comes from that. If we can just all switch our disposition to doing what you said and celebrating it, I think that we can do exactly what you said. We can learn from each other, which is what I love to do the most. I love learning from each other, which is why I want to know what your ethnicity is. I don't want to just hear you're white or you're black. That doesn't tell me anything. I want to know if you're from Romania, because I think it's neat. And I think it's neat that your last name is Roman and you have, your family's from Romania. I think that's cool. So I'm able to make that connection when I know that, though. So that's just one little example. But again, we need to cherish each other. We need to love each other, as you said. So again, thank you. So I want to go into the next quote, which is when we have these clashes, what everyone truly wants is to be happy, to be heard, and to be valued, regardless if the issue at hand is deemed right or wrong. If we truly want to be loving and create a kind world, our job isn't to be defensive in our values. It is to be understanding of another's. It is to operate throughout our days with empathy, compassion, and love. I thought that this was such a powerful and profound statement, Molly, because it takes so much humility to not be defensive in our values and understanding of others. How are you able to exercise this in your life?
I'm going to go back to, love is kind, right? It's easy to be kind to those who are kind to us, not so easy to be kind to those who are rude to us. So with this one, it's really easy, to be this way when, to have dialogue like you're setting up right now, with those friends who are willing to have that dialogue with you, who aren't going to get antagonistic or defensive. Where this does become difficult is you have that person that is trying to push their beliefs and values and opinions on you and say, you should be doing this. For me, and what I've learned actually by writing these articles, is that sometimes if it hits such a strong emotional chord, you might not be ready to have that conversation, and the best thing to do is just to keep your mouth shut. That's something I've learned in the last couple of years, and I think, you learn more things as you grow. You just become more mature. But in spaces where it doesn't quite hit that emotional chord, and what I've learned by writing these articles is that love is oftentimes responding and not reacting. So it's taking that moment to pause and say, what's my reaction? And my reaction is to get irritated with this person. Okay, well, how can I respond and go to love is kind? How can I respond kindly? How can I be patient? And so I'm going to go back just to this whole Corinthians 4 through 8. It's like a toolbox of how to do love. So I would say if you really want to try to not be irritable with people, I would say study all the different aspects of what love is and what it isn't, and how you overcome being envious and boastful, how you overcome being arrogant or rude or resentful. And it will really change the way you interact with others, and it will give you that toolbox of tools to be able to rise out of yourself and out of your ego and emotions to be able to meet people where they need you.
That's excellent. And again, I'm just so amazed with the article, because this is just another part that it fell right into the realm of where I think and what I think on a daily basis about these issues. And when I'm facilitating dialogue on Facebook and I'm trying to, move conversations forward, one of the things that I always say is that we all want the same thing and out of life. And it's kind of like what you said. You said everyone truly wants is to be happy. So the thing that I think about is, when I see people going back and forth and arguing and debating, I'm like, guys, like what you truly want is to feel safe. You want freedom, you want equality, and you want to be happy. So if both of you want that, instead of throwing darts at each other and arguing, how about asking questions to see how you can help the other person accomplish that. Because if you ask questions, it gets to the underlying beliefs and assumptions behind why someone feels scared or why someone may be angry. And if you could do something to help them be happy, in turn, they probably can do something to help you be happy. And, it goes back to, one of the things that when I'm having even, discussions with my wife and we may have a disagreement about something, sometimes I will say to her, let's remember that we both love each other first. Like before we even get into it, because I feel like it kind of resets and it sets a foundation for the discussion. And when I say that, it's like let's remember we love each other and we want to be happy. Because it's just, I feel like that totally changes the tone of the discussion that we're about to have about whatever disagreement. And it helps us to really focus on that's what we're trying to get back to. And we don't get stuck in both of our worlds of I'm right and, I'm right or you're right. I'm sorry, I'm right and you're wrong. It's like we both want to be happy. We both love each other. So let's tone down the darts and, the anger and the venom, and let's speak to love, and let's speak to how we can get back to that foundation of love and happiness. And I really feel like by doing that, if we were able as a society to somehow come to this agreement and it's just like this, it's awareness, it's consciousness. And I think that that's what you're bringing forth with your article. And I hope that that's what we're bringing forth with Race Haven, is that we're creating a foundation where people realize that people from different ethnicities, and especially people of African American descent and European American descent, that literally we're all born into this tension that was created from, years ago. Like even for someone like yourself, whose family is first generation, your parents are first generation immigrants, whose families had nothing to do with, slavery and Jim Crow laws and segregation and lynchings. But if an African American person sees your parents or sees you, just instinctually in their mind, they think that not all, but some, based on what they've been exposed to, there's some people who are going to think that your family may hold those same values or those same biases that they may have learned of from watching videos or reading up about that time in history. And it's very easy to do that. So it's just like, but when you develop relationship and you talk to people and you realize, hold on, every person of European descent, their ancestors weren't even around, during that era. And it's like that level of nuance and that level of complexity is something that, again, a lot of times people don't jump into. So when people are having these debates and these arguments, they're doing it as if, everyone's coming from the same, place. So I'm kind of getting all over the place, but I wanted to throw that in there because I think that that's a little nuanced. And I just think that we need to start thinking, and people need to start thinking about these things when they're having these discussions, and kind of creating a base of, again, everyone truly wants to be happy. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So, you mentioned that people think, they can look at somebody and, think that their family was part of, slavery or whatever, and not really knowing, but those people aren't to be judged either, because those are based off their experiences, right? So it's really dropping, I feel a lot of it is dropping the judgment of one another and really just trying to understand, like, where did you get these perceptions from? But it takes both sides of the table, too, to be open to talking about these things. So that's why I really admire Race Haven. But my question for anybody who's listening to this podcast who may get into the exchanges with one another, especially on social media where it's so easy because you're not actually face-to-face with somebody. But, does it feel good to get angry about things? I just think about feelings and what we create by our words and actions. And, does it feel good to get angry, or does it feel good to create relationships with each other? Think of all the wonderful results that can come from a strong relationship. Think of your best friend or your spouse. What are all the great results of having a strong relationship? And then think about somebody that you don't get along with. What do those results look like, and what feelings does that create for both people involved in that exchange? It's just What is it, what is it that you want for your life? And is it, to feel angry and not to have support from people because you're not creating relationships, you're burning them? It's just, my hope is that for anyone who's listening, if you're in that position where relationships are being destroyed or not being created, is, let's take a different approach. Let's do things that create feelings that are going to create joy and happiness and fulfillment and, create lasting, meaningful results. Sorry, I kind of went off on a little tangent, but
no, that was so necessary and so needed, and I just love it. We'll have to do this again because I feel like, you, by having this dialogue, it pulls so many thoughts out of me that I'm able to articulate things that I've always wanted to share, and I've never had the platform to actually share them in the way I'm sharing them now. So again, I appreciate this article so much. And it actually leads us right into our final segment, which is the solution segment that we have on each show, where I ask our guests to, give us their thoughts and ideas about solutions. How do we move forward and bringing about harmony and building love and relationships in our country, and what our mission statement of Race Haven is, which is to transcend race in America and move past it, not in the sense of that it doesn't exist, but in the sense of the divisiveness and the tension. And honestly, my goal is to truly transcend race and more so get to appreciating ethnicity and differences been discussing. So I feel like this question from your article is the perfect solution segment question. So I want to end with this. You wrote, what would our communities look like if we were inquisitive rather than judgmental? So if you could close us out with your thoughts on that, and then I'll give mine. I think that would be the perfect way to close out our solution segment.
Sure. So the first word that came up for me is partnerships. I think we would see a lot of partnerships across the board. And what comes, and I think I kind of touched on this already. So what comes from partnerships, right? You have support, you have give and take, you have, you would have love of some sort, even if it's just a business partnership, right? Think of all the different things that could be created if, let's say you and I, for instance, let's say you and I butt heads and, we weren't having this dialogue like we are now, we were debating, right? We would not create anything. We would go our separate ways and probably never talk to each other again. But who knows, maybe now, because we've had this conversation, someday I'm going to help promote your book, and so it's thinking about if we created partnerships instead of divisiveness, what are all the great things that we could create and then put out into the world? And, love is not irritable, love is understanding. So think about what are the fruits of love. The top ones that come to my mind are joy, compassion, empathy, fulfillment, creating a meaningful life. So it's really, I think our communities would just completely transform if you got every single person on this planet to start being understanding rather than irritable. Your thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. And I agree wholeheartedly. I often get, when I talk to people and I share some of my views, a lot of times people say to me that I'm very idealistic and I'm a dreamer. And I always say, you are absolutely correct. Because, and I own it, and I don't mind owning it, because I believe that everything, I know for a fact that everything that exists in this world started with a thought, and that thought things. And it took people daring to, or let me say this, the people that move our world forward are the people who think about ideals, the people who think about, being daring enough to think about what if. What if things were different than what they are currently? And I always think to myself that just because something's always been done a certain way doesn't mean that it always has to be done that way. And if we look throughout history, our world is constantly evolving and things are constantly changing for the better. And things are constantly becoming more innovative and creative. And it's those people who are open to pushing the envelope and thinking about things like this and thinking about things that are different that ultimately make a positive change and a dent and put a dent into the world. So when I think about what our communities look like if we were inquisitive rather than judgmental, I actually, when you said something earlier, just in the previous question about what if on our, these Facebook threads where a lot of these discussions are going on, these debates are going on, I just thought about wouldn't it be amazing if someone posted something and all the comments were just people asking each other questions? What if it was literally, instead of everyone coming out and telling someone why their thoughts are wrong, or someone coming out and giving their point of view without being prompted and asked first, what if everything started with a question and a reason, like why? Why do you feel that way? Why do you think that way? And then people responded to those questions. We would grow so much. And what would our communities look like if we were inquisitive rather than judgmental? Our communities would look brighter, happier, more whole, peaceful. We would reduce violence. We would reduce crime. Everyone, a larger percentage of people in our world would be doing what they were called to do on this earth and not operating in fear. And even I have these philosophies that they all kind of mesh, and my philosophies about education. A lot of people, choose certain schooling or career options based on fear instead of based on happiness, and based on the fear of being judged by others, instead of someone saying, what do you feel like you were put on this earth to do? That's being inquisitive rather than judgmental, instead of saying you need to go out and get a job and do this because that's a particular good field. It may pay you this. It may do this, that, and the other. Again, judgment and fear versus inquisitive. What do you feel like you were put on this earth to contribute? And listening. Imagine if we gave every young person the opportunity to be, if we were inquisitive as adults and gave every young person the opportunity, to answer that question honestly, instead of us, putting our fear or judgments onto them. It's things like this that I always think about. And I personally feel like the solution is exactly what you said, Molly. It is, what if we were inquisitive rather than being judgmental? It would change the world. Imagine if the stress levels of every person would be down, because we will all be walking in our purpose. We will all be walking in love. And if we were all doing that, just by changing our disposition in the way that we interact with the world from a position of inquisitiveness and love, it would totally just change the world. And it is something that I am dead set on making my life all about in everything that I do.
That's awesome.
So I want to just say, thank you, for coming on. I want to say thank you, first of all, for writing that article. And like you said earlier, God put certain people in your life for a reason, and I totally believe that. You are someone that was so special to me, years ago, because of the love, that you gave, to me and my organization. And I love you for that. And we have never been, for our listeners, Molly and I weren't friends. We literally met just from her giving of herself to the cause that we put forth. And I so appreciate that. And she basically modeled love. And, she's leading by example, and I hope to do the same. So what I like to do at this time is just say, to all of our listeners, that's our time for today. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to give a special thank you again to my guest, Molly Roman. So, Molly, would you briefly tell our listeners how they can contact you and tell them about Verge of Greatness and your wonderful book and how they can get their hands on that? Because I believe that anyone who's listening to this, if you were moved by anything that you heard today, if anything resonated with you, you will absolutely love everything that Molly is bringing forth through Verge of Greatness and through the wonderful book that she wrote that I'm going to let her tell you about now.
Well, thank you again for those wonderful compliments. It's so sweet, and that, it's obviously really nice to hear. So thank you. And, I feel the same way about you and all the things that you do, and you keep pushing forward, and you never stop. And I wouldn't be surprised if I see something called Inquisitive Mondays, where everyone has to ask a question before they comment. So I'm sure that's something we're going to see in the future. But so I guess with what I do, I just bought the domain mollyroman.com, because that's a lot easier to figure out than what I currently have, and it will just redirect anyone to my website. You can actually buy the book there, and it's cheaper to buy it there than on Amazon, so I would recommend that. But what's
the title of the book?
So the book is called Good at Life. It's a 20-something's guide to discovering your true potential and creating a brilliant life through faith, hope, and love. And it's based off Catherine of Siena's quote, "If we become what God creates us to be, we will set the world ablaze." So it's really helping people figure out their purpose, living in that purpose, and creating a meaningful and fulfilling life. It is for the 20-somethings. I have a passion for working with 20-somethings because I believe they are in a super powerful position to change the world. They're educated, they're young, and they don't have families and other obligations. I love my kids, but I will say it definitely, your time is a little more constrained. But with that, what I was going to say is that the real crux of the book is faith, hope, and love. And so anyone who wants that copy for free, I'm happy to send you the PDF version of it. All you have to do is reach out to me. So you can do that at my website. You can send me a comment, or you can go ahead and just call me. My number is 678-733-3193. I'm more than happy to help you in whatever you need if I have the availability and the ability to do so. So this book, although it's for 20-somethings, I do believe it can help anybody in any area of their life.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
so,
and thank
again,
you for
Molly,
having me on the show today.
And thank you for your time. It was definitely my pleasure, and I'm sure our listeners got so much out of what you had to share today. And I, look forward to bringing you back at some point so that we can discuss whatever your next project is, because I know it's going to be something great. So, thank you so much, Molly. You have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
So, for our listeners, please be sure to subscribe to the Race Haven Radio Show and Podcast on iTunes or Stitcher Radio so that you never miss the dialogue. You can comment on today's show at RaceHavenBlog.com and join our online community by joining the Race Haven Facebook group. If today's episode resonated with you, please share the podcast link on social media and with your friends. Race Haven is a safe place for people from diverse ethnic, religious, cultural, and political backgrounds to bring their race-based perspectives, questions, assumptions, frustrations, and experiences to engage in thoughtful, honest dialogue in an effort to transcend race in America. Remember, all smarter when we think together. This episode of Race Haven was sponsored by Premium Outsourced Apps. Do you have an idea for the next big web or mobile app, but you don't have coding skills? Are you a business owner that is looking to elevate your brand by creating a mobile app for your customers? Premium Outsourced Apps offers superior apps at superior prices by combining a team of American-based project managers with talented and experienced engineers from overseas. Visit premiumoutsourcedapps.com today to learn about the 50% less guarantee. Until next time, peace.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers. Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Offers require port of number not currently active on T-Mobile network. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 40p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers. Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Offers require port of number not currently active on T-Mobile network. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 40p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.